Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jon Myer Podcast. Today's topic is DevOps done. Well, I don't think it's done, and I think it's still around. But before we get to our topic, how about we introduce our guest for today, Mark Freydl, who is the co-CEO of Codiac. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Hey, nice to be here.
Okay, Mark, before we get to our topic, is DevOps done? How about you define DevOps?
Well, it's a big topic. I think part of the issue with DevOps is that it's very difficult to define these days because it's been growing and expanding into all these various things. But we could put a definition on it as to it is the process of releasing your software from conception out to the customer's hands. And a very important part of that is that DevOps piece is a cycle. And so it starts from I've got a thing that has to be produced one way or another, a feature, a bug fix, whatever that may be, a product. We're going to walk it through. We're going to develop it. We're going to test it. We're going to release it. We're going to watch it, maintain it, monitor it, and then move that feedback back to the next feature that comes out. So as a team, if you're running a good DevOps operation, you have a good cycle and you've got a good velocity and you have a good MO, modus operandus for moving out features on a regular basis, a good routine for how that happens. And DevOps essentially is, well, let's put another definition on it from another perspective. DevOps is all those things that you do other than your business software. So you can build an app all you want and leave it on your laptop, but that's not going to do the world any good. DevOps is the process of saying, well, I have to get that app to the world. And I have a whole team of people that do that. It's not just a developer game, although some companies are, but I have product managers and I've got CEOs, I've got CTOs, I've got people that QA this thing, I've got users that test it, I got customers that have feedback on it, I've got release notes that go out. There's the whole business of owning software. Well, DevOps kind of knits all that together. It's the development operations is what that word means, and really is for a company who runs software or produces software. DevOps is your ability to actually get your product out into the world.
Mark, DevOps was kind of introduced back in, what was it, 2007, 2008. So about 17 years ago. Before DevOps, what did things look like? What did people do before then?
Sneakernet. We used to copy files. To go all the way back, back into the aughts, in the early 2000s, we were copying files, we were FTPing files up to servers to deploy them. We were also managing some people. I remember even source code control was not as common a thing. It has been, this century, it started to really take on. But I remember being back in the 90s, and there were some source control companies, and there were other companies that simply didn't. And that source control, managing that whole piece is its own, again, DevOps is a big topic, but it's its own discussion on the end. People used to copy files, they used to move files, they used to manually put servers together. They would have these coordination meetings well in advance saying, hey, we've got a release coming up. Where's it going to go and who's got the server and who's going to put that together? Sometimes it's really a matter of saying, literally, I've worked for and spoken with a number of companies that literally walk down the street. They carrying equipment to their data center to do that. It's made a lot of inroads in the last several years, and I think what I found really interesting about it, why I think maybe this is another thing that has happened to DevOps, is that it's just a lot more interesting than it used to be because we have the ability now to automate infrastructure. And we have an ability now to use the cloud and to scale that way. And so to scale a virtual service is a completely different thing than what it used to be, which was, okay, I'm going to copy my files over to this server, box, physical thing, and we're going to put that in a rack. And then I'm going to copy my files over to this box, and John needs to put another box up for the dev server. So we're going to wait for that, and let's have another meeting about that. Those types of things went on. And today, it's more a matter of how best do we handle this, because we can automate that stuff, or we can at least access it through a portal or some sort of web interface. So no need for the wagon and the sidewalk anymore.
Mark, I remember back then when we were trying to do a product release and work through a cycle like enhancements, oh no, we're releasing, version 3.1. It took 1 to 2 years to get this release out because you had to do every bit of it and you couldn't just release enhancements or features upon it. And yes, I was probably one of those guys that was carrying that box down the road. I won't date myself and the age, but I think with the inception of DevOps, when it was originally introduced in, we'll say 2007 because the dates kind of vary in a year, and I'll just pick the later one. But I think with the release of that, what has really changed since then and now?
I'd say for one, standards. What excited me about it, for instance, was the fact that if you just talk on one topic alone in containerization, and a lot of not all companies are containerized at the moment. I understand that, but what for me, that's probably the biggest quintessential change that I've seen in that uh, because of that standard, you have an entire half of the process now that can be handled by a whole bunch of companies and a whole bunch of products that can be very efficiently driven against that standard of containerization. So if I can support containers and I can support and customizing those containers, then I have what it's a large feature set, but it's a finite feature set. If I have to support whatever you came up with in whatever language and however you decided to put it together, and I have to figure out how to get it to work on that server, well, there's a whole bunch of products and a whole bunch of things that I just can't do for you. At least I can't scale them. So that the ability to say that no matter what you do, I don't care what language you wrote it in, as long as you can give it to me in a container, we can work together and I can provide you all of this great benefit, and I can build a company around that. So that to me, obviously that one's near and dear to me because I did build a company that works on containers, but that's a big change. And another, I think another really big change was obviously the change to the shift to the cloud. Whereas a lot of companies there still are, depending on who you are, there's a fringe of very highly secure, wanting to be offline, don't want to share their stuff in a cloud environment, or maybe not even a private cloud environment, but they want to use their own data centers. That still exists. But let's just talk about the mainstream. We now have access to the cloud, and we have a mindset of, I can pass that server work, I can pass all that network engineering off to a third party to manage for me. And that was a long time coming. I mean, just like there was a time when we didn't want to put our credit cards online and didn't want to buy anything online. Obviously that's changed. And the same thing goes. We're like, I'm not sure I'm crazy about putting my stuff off in a third party who's going to manage and watch my servers for me. I'm not sure. We went through all the things that went through all the different gradations and evolutions that it took to get there. And now we've got infrastructure on demand. We've got deployments out there that we can just push out to various cloud providers. We can have solutions that are multiple cloud providers scripted up to high heaven. There's a lot of just an enormous amount of benefit that goes with that. And along with it, again, back to the wagon and the walking the servers down the street and building that data center, scale is a completely different thing now. It's available to a lot smaller companies than it used to be, and under a lot different kind of conditions. There's a lot more of, we can buy only what we need today, and if we're wrong about it, well, switch it. You can't go off and buy too much in the way of servers, and then say, oh, well, what are we going to do with these? Well, you got to put them in the back room, maybe get rid of them, but you're not going to be able to get anything for them. You're just going to have to buy new ones and hope you're okay with it. Now it's just, scale as you need to, change what you need to. It's really it's a different ball game.
Mark, our topic today is DevOps done? And I guess my question is, after 17 years, is it done or has it evolved?
I'm going to go with evolved. I'm trying to become part of that evolution, or I'm really trying to push that evolution, because I do see that what we've done is glorious. We've done some glorious things. Like take, for instance, CICD is a big part of this. That's continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, which side you want to go on. That's been a big part of it, and that's a beautiful pattern. Before we were doing that, we were doing a lot of things by hand, and we were diagnosing, debugging, and managing a lot of very intricate issues between versions and repos and things like that. And so the pattern of, let's have an automated build process central, so that everybody submits code from all over the place. That thing will always be the system of record for what is what and where everybody is on it. There's not a stale machine that doesn't have your updates yet or that kind of thing. It's the central piece. That alone is really important. That automation is really important that goes along with it. And the notion that when I build something, it's going to be built the same way every time. It's a fantastic thing, and I bought into that fully when I was introduced to it way back then. But it, for a lot of companies, was just good enough. And in the same sense of any kind of evolution, we don't have the most ideal features of any given species isn't equipped with the ideal features. It's got all the features it needed. That's it. And so when it comes to like, well, what could we do? Well, I can think of a lot of things that we could do to try to improve it. The question is, well, why? And if we're already getting this done, what's the point? And the point is, if you can get tenfold increase off of what you're doing, then do it. If you can't, maybe it's not as interesting because, again, we've evolved to here. We put a lot of work into where we are, and we seem to be going fine with it. But the reality is, tenfold is not even close to what's possible right now. Like when you can say, you are manually scripting those CI/CD pipelines, you're manually debugging them, and you are also managing all of those environments that you're deploying to manually. Manually meaning, again, those technologies we were talking about before, where I may be going to a portal and I may be pressing buttons and clicking things to make these things happen. They're still very complex deployments that you may have to manage. Well, all of that is a moving target, and we have to script all that together. And that's really it's challenging for what it is, and a lot of companies are used to it. And I think as humans, we sort of accept, where we are, and it's I've run across this idea a number of different times where it's not until you realize there's a better way that you start feeling the anxiety of what you're doing. Sometimes it's just, I'm doing what we got to do. I'm fighting the good fight, and this is how it's got to get done. And then somebody walks in and says, well, actually, you could be doing it this way, and you'd be getting a tenfold, hundredfold improvement out of it. When if you're stuck doing that thing that you used to be doing, it's not as much fun anymore. It's not even as much as fulfilling anymore. In fact, it's pretty stressful. You think, why are we doing it this way? And this is taking so long. And this is, you have to have something to compare it to do that. And so now when we realize that we can change how fast companies work, we can change the way how much access you have to new markets, how much speed you have to beat out your competitors, how fast you can be to respond to a customer request. If all those things have changed, and all those things can now have be sitting on a different footing, what do I try to say? A different level of productivity, then you have this responsibility to say, well, let's check that out. I mean, right? If we're still doing this the way we were doing this 17 years ago, and this is software, this is technology, that's eons. Are you sure that's still the best way? So what I'm saying is that the current approach is ubiquitous. It was a great idea. Everybody did it. And it's a traditional, ubiquitous thing. Companies all over the place, you Google it, this is the way it's done, and everybody does it that way.
Are there challenges when implementing DevOps in a company that's already utilizing the methodology, but hasn't really kind of defined it, or trying to implement it new?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is the silo. DevOps is complicated. It takes somebody who knows a lot about some very deep topics to accomplish. And I have no, I feel for any given DevOps engineer whose life is extremely complicated, extremely deep in a broad set of topics. And in general, and I think you'll agree with me if you're if you're a DevOps engineer, no news is good news. And the only time anybody really cares so much about what you're doing or really appreciates it, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but it's when something's broken. And when it's broken, then you're the center of attention. If everything's working fine, no matter how much work you put in, it's not necessarily like, hey, so glad Jon did a great job on the DevOps. We're still up today. And that's just not the way it goes. Anyway, some of the challenges there are that guy who's running that, building that implementation or running that implementation is that one guy. Now, that person or woman, if that guy or woman is actually has somebody with them working in tandem with them, that's great. But we all know how that is when the knowledge of this beast, who knows where all the bodies are buried and where all these elements live and how well they play together. Well, that's tribal knowledge, or it's siloing, or whatever you want to call it. But that day will come when someone says, I don't want to touch that. John built that, and I it's working, and let's not touch it. And that's not even a small thing. I've talked to, and I've been a consultant for many years, and I've been in a lot of operations and in and out of a lot of different companies in various different situations. And that one element alone I've seen a million times. And I've even seen a company who couldn't deploy their software, and they were so afraid to change their production system because it was delicate, it was fragile, there was a lot of moving parts. Only one person really knew how those moving parts fit together, and so they said, look, I don't want to touch it. And customers were like, you got to touch it. We've got this issue and that issue. They got to go out, and they couldn't release, and so they had to hire big, and they had to bring consultants in, which is where I met these guys. It really is, it can become really challenging just knowing that there's an individual that has that deep knowledge and has to be able to transfer it. There's also, just like I was saying, the idea that this beast is many different parts. I talked about it, where how it's a cycle. Well, any given stage of that cycle, whether you're in testing or you're in development, go have a conversation and ask the same questions. What is DevOps to anybody who's on, focusing on one of those parts of that cycle? They may give you a completely different answer about it because it's so deep. There's so much going on there. A developer may tell you DevOps is all about getting my code upstream and managing the versions of my code, the branching strategies, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. There's a whole host of things you can have a conversation about there. So the point is that DevOps is hard because it starts to get bigger, and in some companies, big enough that no one person actually knows how all of it is strung together. And so if you have then a good enough solution that was just good enough for the way we did business 10 years ago, and it's stuck in place, and you have siloed knowledge, and it's big enough that nobody really understands the whole picture. They understand parts of it, and nobody wants to touch the other parts because, God, what do we be into if it broke? How are you going to evolve out of that? You suddenly it's this thing that snowballed beyond where we can change it, and now we're perpetuating what basically was a great idea 10 years ago, and no matter what it's going to take to manage it and run it, well, that's our business now because it's grown that way. Obviously, that's a worst case scenario, but it's very true, and it happens a lot, and different to varying degrees to different companies. I think most people relate, that um, those things can't those processes are hard to get out of once they get started, and this is definitely one of them. It's broad, it's deep, it's technical, and it's not this little thing sitting on the side of your business that just kind of, I mean, I don't like it when the AC goes out, but my life doesn't change that much. It'll get turned on in a day or yeah, it's a little frustrating. I mean, time of year, I live in Florida, so yeah, it can be a problem, but we'll live through it. DevOps goes down, that is the central process. Whatever, take a part of it. I can't release software, I can't test it, or I can't get it out, I can't do a deployment. I got customers that are coming in, we can't respond to them. Whatever part of that can actually affect your business, that can affect the timelines, affect the budgets. I mean, it affects everything. It's really, you don't have to understand about DevOps to know that as a company, as any organization, the way that we're going to win is by being good, by putting the right pieces together that fit together, that work together, and that actually function properly. If I'm trying to design a car that's going to win a race, well, I know that I got to have good components, and I know that I have to have somebody good who can put those things together. I want all the best pieces to go into that thing. When it's not that way, you're gonna see effect on your company, and those effects are time, cost, and risk, and we see them. And in some cases, it's straight up, I lost a customer because we had an outage. I keep this folder on my drive of screenshots of 404s and oops, we're down, or sorry, we couldn't respond to your request, try again later. And from notable websites like household family names, that you would never think. I mean, they've got a whole team working on all these things. There's no way it would go down and right in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. Wow, did you know such and such is down? It happens all the time. It's a very difficult problem. So uh, how it can, how we can step beyond that and stop talking about the worst case scenario or the last chapter is, we say, well, as a community and as a DevOps culture, what can we do about that? Well, obviously there's standards I was talking about. There's ways to standardize, and the more we standardize, the more we can hand off to a platform or hand off to a team that dedicates itself to that particular piece. Better communication. There's I mean, this discussion can go on and on, but I'll just name a couple here, like where you have an entire team of people that need to do all sorts of different things in the course of releasing software. If all of the DevOps tools and all of the DevOps products that your company is invested in are all run by that one DevOps guy, he's not he's he's not going to be able to scale himself into every single discussion and to help everybody out. The idea that you can provide some autonomy to these people that need to work together on this, it can make a massive difference in the company. And the thing is, a lot of people, a lot of the market out there right now is dedicated toward the DevOps engineer for all those reasons I mentioned before. He's the only guy that really knows what's going on. He's the technical guy. He's the guy we trust implementing this stuff. And I don't want anybody else wasting their time with it. Okay, that's great. Those are all good reasons, except that you just loaded them up with more and more and more and more and more, and it never stops. And talk to them. A lot of those people are overworked. They're under a huge amount of stress, and a lot of them are just not able to handle the load. And so they can, I mean, they can handle it, but that cost does come out. It comes out in terms of, well, I can't respond to you this week. I'll get you next week, or maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, or we're just not doing that right now. We're going to think about doing that next quarter. There's a lot of mitigation that goes on there to try to keep that whole system alive.
Mark, before I wrap things up, I got one more question for you, and I think it goes on to our topic: Is DevOps done? Where do you see the future of DevOps?
I particularly see it taking a pivot. Right now, like I was mentioning, it's a very engineering centric process, and a whole set of engineering centric tooling. But those problems are not artistic problem solving anymore. Solving those problems is more science these days. And so we can productize those things. And so when you can do that, you can go back to enabling those other players on the team. And so when it comes to what we should be seeing in the future is, this is where platform engineering, for instance, stands. You're seeing more people talking about platform engineering, depending on where you get it, how you do it, but may vary from company to company. But the notion of it, that I'm trying to make intuitive what was a very hands-on, meticulous process. Can I get this person over here who's, for instance, running QA? Can this QA person, can I make that person autonomous? Or do I have to give that person access to a DevOps engineer or some other hands-on keyboard tech type who can help them work through this process deployment, whatever that may be? So the more autonomy that I think we're going to start seeing, because we're going to see more standardization, because we have more understanding of what these processes are. And so I think a more fluid environment and a more fluid team is going to result from this. I think in general, that's the way I see it. That's what I said at the beginning, is that's a pivot from the direction that we're going in right now. And a lot of what's happening right now is it's simply spreading and continuing down that very traditional and ubiquitous route that's got set in motion a long time ago. So some things like the advent of environments on demand, where you can say, well, it used to be that I had to coordinate the development of if we wanted to put a dev environment together or a test environment together, there was a lot of work and a few meetings and a couple other things that needed to happen, including some budget that had to change hands. Whereas now we can do that on demand in a matter of seconds. And so what does that mean? Well, it means a lot more autonomy. and it means a lot more fluidity in the way we work together. And so that type of thing it's now intuitive. It's not a technical process. And so what happens? We develop and evolve within that. I mean, I think a good example of that is if it took a DevOps engineer to bend my elbow, if this little process of bending my elbow and taking a sip required a YAML script and a DevOps engineer in a coordination meeting, we wouldn't have cocktail parties. We wouldn't have, even the notion of like, we can go have a beer and sail on, go out on the boat and have a beer. It's like, well, would we bring our DevOps engineers with us on the boat? Like, we just wouldn't do that if we were going to an interview.
Well, that depends, man.
What's that?
I said, well, that depends. Maybe I might bring them with.
Of course, we want them there. They've been doing a great job.
Yeah, all right, exactly. We got to give them praise because it's working.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that if it were not intuitive like it is, there's a lot of things that talk to that culture that never learned how to automate the arm bend and keep and do the drink. Well, there's all kinds of things they can't do, and they wouldn't understand even the idea of a cocktail party or something. And so that's where we can say when it becomes intuitive and when everybody can operate autonomously and do their part of the job in their creative way, there's something that will evolve into something that we don't know about yet, and it will be, a hell of a lot faster and more powerful than we are today.
Well, Mark, I got to wrap up this lively discussion. Is DevOps done? And I think I got my answer of no, but there's more to it. And I think we need further discussions, not only on DevOps, the amount of technical debt, the reliability of DevOps, the single, the silos. There's so much information around it. Mark, I got to thank you, man. This is really great.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Love talking about it too, Jon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everybody, this has been a Jon Myer podcast. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of here.